guess. Hell.
There's that sync clap is. I'll give us one more. All right. All right, everybody. Welcome to Audio Knuckle Busters. Today, I've got a great friend, a great guest. I would say he is maybe one of my favorite people on the planet. I've got Mr. Josh Robinson with us today. And one of the reasons why I wanted to invite Josh to podcast with us is because one of the biggest reasons is because he has been a studio owner, wearing many, many different hats along the way, not only as a studio owner, but a producer, a musician, a engineer. So all the different hats that are out there, that lie out there for people to take into consideration, Josh has been in that position. And sometimes I think it is very fair to say all at the same time. So, Josh, welcome, first of all, man. This is freaking awesome that you've taken the time out of your very, very busy schedule to come spend a little time with me. Unfortunately, our other AKBers, they are doing their various things today. I'm the oldest out of everybody, and so it seems like I have maybe a little bit more time than some of these other cats do that are out there. But thank you for coming.
Well, thank you so much, Tim. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, let's just kind of dive right in. So I've known you for, I think it's
20 years. I was thinking about it this morning. 20 years. Our relationship can drive a car. It can vote.
Yep.
It can join the military, but it can't buy alcohol yet. So we're at 20 years right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not to get off on a personal note, but so I've got a daughter that I think you watched her be born, basically. Maybe not right there, but per se. But my oldest, Wolfgang, he had already been born. But then there was Willow. And so, yeah, she was born about the time that you and I met one another, and I met you as actually in a band.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That is, actually. You were employed as our producer / engineer.
Okay, so let's go back all the way to there first. Okay, let's just start kind of from the beginning of yours and my relationship, of which I've got to say, I watched you grow by leaps and bounds. You were not only my employer, meaning that you had hired me to come in as an engineer, maybe even a partial co-producer with the band, so on and so forth. But let's go back to there. Tell us a little bit about Josh.
It's kind of an open-ended question, but I think whenever you and I picked up, I was playing in a band. We were originally from Lubbock, Texas, and found a pretty decent following there and really enjoyed playing music, so we thought that it would make sense to move to the Metroplex, Dallas-Fort Worth. So then we started working on originals and booking studio time and needed somebody to drive the race car, and so that's where we picked up. Heard about Tim through lots of different friends who knew their stuff, and they're like, you got to get this guy in on it. He's exactly what you're looking for, and turns out he was. Well,
I thank you for that. I think I was under the impression that we wanted to keep that local when I first met with you guys. You along with a few other band members. I think we did a little bit of research there in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I was under the impression at the time that we were going to probably try to keep it local, I'll go as far as to say maybe keep the cost as low as we possibly could, but much to my surprise, you guys had something completely different in mind, which, let me just say, it blew my freaking doors off. I had no idea. This goes a lot to say that sometimes we interpret things maybe the wrong way. And where I'm going with all of this is that I think after we had maybe done a little bit of research at various studios in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I'm coming home and I get a phone call, I think it was from you, going, look, I'm not real sure that you understand what we're after. And that is that we don't want to be in the local studios per se, nothing against them. However, we feel like as a collective band, it might behoove us, it might be better for us to not do the recordings locally.
Yeah, it was one of those things. We looked at rooms locally, and this is not to knock Dallas studios by any means, but this was late 90s, early 2000s when the days of the big studio were still roaring. And so I think after looking around in Dallas, we didn't find the right fit for us, both in pricing and gear and in availability. A lot of places were booked. So then we opened the search a little wider. We found Studio X in Seattle, which I don't know if it's still there. It was Bad Animals, and then it turned into Studio X, and I'm not sure if it still exists. But
it does.
Yeah, awesome room. Sam Hofstedt, engineer there. I don't know if he's still up there. What's up, Sam? But yeah, it turns out Studio X made us a great deal, and it's a little bit of a drive, but that for me in my memory is one of my. It's a sick, twisted memory. But 4 guys getting into a extended cab pickup with a gear trailer and driving nonstop from Dallas to Seattle. Literally, some of us sleeping in the bed of the truck while other ones drove up front. So it was a bonding trip. We got to know each other pretty well. But man, by the time we got to Seattle, we were ready to lay it down. So we were just so excited. It was a harder fought trip, and so just something about the mentality, the climate, the everything else, plus Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam and lots of our idols had recorded in that studio, so it very much felt like a hallowed space.
It was a hallowed space. So I'm going to back up just a little bit, and first of all, let you know that here locally, we have a couple of guys that actually come into Ranchland Studios to make use of this facility. Here we are 20 years later, that actually do a whole bunch of work out of Studio X. And I just found out like last week that the studio is actually beginning to kind of shut down. Mm. So Sam has been up there all this time.
Still there?
Still there.
Oh, man.
As a matter of fact, I think most of the folk that were there when we were up there over 20 years ago, or right at 20 years ago, have stayed the whole time. They've held their ground. They've done what they do. There locally, and of course, it was like everyone's hallowed ground, if you will. I also remember going back to those days, memory-wise. So, like you guys, this is what blew me away. You guys freaking flew John Congleton and me to Seattle, and yet you guys got in your truck with a trailer on the back and drove, 30-something hours?
About like that, yeah. We left late one night and drove the whole next day, and I think it was early the next morning we got there and literally didn't stop except for gas, food, or whatever. But I just want to say the gear had to get there. I mean, we weren't really hot enough to fly all of our gear in road cases, so somebody had to put it in the trailer and drive it there, so it became everybody's job. So,
well, it blew me away just simply that you guys thought enough of myself, I guess, and most certainly Congleton, who obviously has gone on to to do great things. I got to sit down with him for a couple of hours a couple of weeks ago. Man, that guy has just taken off and has soared. So I remember, and I have probably some pictures laying around somewhere where he was like, probably in the mic locker, and he's just loving on these mics that we've got sitting in this closet, going, "Oh, I'm willing to bet that Nirvana probably used these microphones when they were doing their thing up here." And kind of going back to Sam Hofstedt. Man, what a gentle giant this freaking guy is. He comes in and is basically what I would call obviously much more than an assistant. The guy totally knows his stuff, but was just so incredibly gentle, so giving. Walked in, anything that you guys need, it doesn't matter what it is. Here, come to me, talk to me. I'll get what you need. And all of that to say that I'm learning as I've gotten older that a lot of this has to do with relationships. It's not about and I'm about to, Josh, I'm about to kind of get off on the personal relationships and how important that is in the recording industry. You're very aware of this, being a studio owner and so on and so forth. But last week I had Chris Godby. Was in front of him for a little bit, and we got off on this whole discussion about it's not about the equipment per se. A lot of times we make use of what we have in front of us. But it's more about the relationships that one acquires along the way and how to treat people and how to make yourself presentable in front of those people and how those certain friendships, or shall we say relationships, turn into bigger and other relationships that actually advance you along the way. And this has been something that I've had to learn, as of late. It is real easy for a 58-year-old engineer who's been doing this for 40 years to realize that sometimes the best way to do things is take a back seat, get your pride out of the way, and kind of go, I'm going to assist. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make someone's session go as smoothly as they possibly can. Here's where I'm going with it. So as we advance through the stages of the band, we not only went to Studio X, but after that was over with, as a band, there were a couple of other places that we wound up going. One was out in far west Texas. That was Tony's place, Tony Ranch's place, which is Sonic Ranch.
Right.
And
Tornillo, Texas.
Tornillo, yeah. So, like, I understand that Tornillo, not that this has anything to do with studios per se, but Tornillo is one of the places where a lot of the I'm going to get off on this one here just a little bit, but where a lot of our incoming folk from the South are being encamped at this point. I couldn't believe it when I read it. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's heavy.
They've got lots of land out there.
Yeah.
Anyhow, and I don't know how that's affecting Sonic Ranch and so on and so forth, but there's another facility that has endured the test of time. You and I, we literally kind of cut our teeth out there. This was 20 years ago.
About that.
And this facility still exists. They're still kicking butt out there doing what they do. Once again, I think a lot of that had to do with relationships that were built.
Well, and so just to cut in, as far as what I'm hearing you talk about is like the human factor. And what I've learned in my however long that I don't want to count is that, knowing your stuff inside and out is a foregone conclusion. It needs to be there anyway. You need to have your skill set tight, everything else, just to be proficient at whatever it is that you do. But it's the personality, and it doesn't matter if you're talking audio, if you're talking like whatever line of work it is that you're in, someone's personality, their approachability, their willingness to help, just the way that they carry themselves. If people like being around you, they'll find a reason for you to be there. Everybody likes that guy. He's always, he restrung that guitar, and then he got his pizza, and then he did this and that. Little things that might not seem like they're, brain surgeon level difficult, but that's what people remember. I could tell you just as much about like the helpers at Studio X and all of the awesome stuff they did to make us comfortable as I could about what the signal chain was on the kick drum on the third track. That's for big picture stuff, is that if you carry yourself right in life, be nice, show up. For kids that are in production, if you want to get a job in production, it is not as simple as going to school and getting that piece of paper and then walking out of like, okay, who's going to give me a job? You're going to do, I would say, about the same thing as you would do regardless, which is find a studio that you want to work in or whatever facility it is that you want to work in, however you want to utilize your skills. Find that place, meet the people, be nice to them, sweep the floor, take the trash out, come in on Sundays, do whatever it is that they ask of you. Shut up. Know when to be quiet, listen, do what you're told. Just be an agreeable dude that makes a great pot of coffee, and I promise you'll get called, and then one day whenever somebody comes in sick, oh, well, I know how to do that. Holy crap, that guy just took that channel strip apart, put it back together. The session's going to run. Way to go, Coffee Boy. All of a sudden, Coffee Boy moves up, and that's not only are you learning your skills, but you're also learning, like you were talking about Sam, how cool Sam was at Studio X. Mm-hmm. I can only imagine the crazy stuff that he saw over the years. If that room could talk, all of the different situations that he had been put in of like, oh my gosh, and you could fill in the blank on whatever rock band debauchery would be going on. But Sam's just there to make sure that stuff doesn't get spilled, that the session goes on. He does whatever's necessary. He's like the studio whisperer. He just makes sure that your experience is a great one and that when you walk away, you have a product that you're happy with. And he'll do whatever he has to facilitate that, from pizza to channel strips, But the more experiences that you go through, the less it takes to trip your trigger into freak out mode. It's just like, it's just another day. Oh, you think that's crazy? Let me tell you about the one time that blah, blah, blah. It's about the way that you carry yourself. It's about being cool. It's about being nice. It's about being approachable. And if people see that and feel that, it's an energy thing. I want to take a shower, make yourself nice. Don't stink the studio up. There's also that.
Yeah. Oh,
but
yeah.
that goes right along with wanting for people to want you to be around is, you need to make sure that you're presentable in all aspects.
Well said. So I think I learned a lot from Sam, even though I didn't realize it at the time. I think I learned a lot from you, even though I didn't know it at the time. I'm going to go back just a little bit, once again, back to Tornillo, where we were out at Sonic Ranch. I think that we learned a whole lot about ourselves being in this, I think it's isolated, right?
Yeah.
It's very much an isolated place. One of the things that I certainly have learned through the years is that sometimes it's really good to be around people, but it's also pretty cool to be isolated, where you're not getting the phone calls. And of course, back then there were cell phones still. We had cell phones, but the fact that the signal was not readily available.
I don't want to pay them roaming charges. It's $1.25 a minute in Tornillo.
Yeah.
Back in the old school days, there was no calling anywhere for free. It was like, oh wait, you're out of your home area. That's going to cost you.
And I once again, I remember all of us at some point or another, we had to take a break at some point or another, maybe kind of check in home and trying to find this one spot. Look, if I stand on one leg with the other leg up in the air and if I lean over this way, I've got signal for, the next minute, and then it might go away. All right, so kind of where I'm kind of going with that whole thing, we also landed upon some really cool assistants that totally knew what they were doing, even there in Tornillo. Once again, kind of the, if you will, the whisperer, if you will. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't his name Jason? Was it Jason that was our assistant out there?
Man, you got me in the folds of my mind. I can't remember.
I can't remember.
See him. I remember him working on that little old school Mac Cube out in the lobby with the grand piano. And I remember walking by him, super nice kid. Sorry, it's been too long. I can't remember his name.
I want to say it was Jason.
But he was seen and not heard. And that's the thing, is that he did what was necessary.
Yeah.
And he wasn't interjected up into our business. So it wasn't, whereas Sam was a little bit more hands-on. That guy was a lot greener, but he still knew the studio inside and out. And he was pretty much just quiet in the corner unless you needed him. And then much like a tennis ball boy, not to cheapen it, but you jet into action, you get what needs to be done, and then you get out of the way so guys can do what they need to do. So,
well, okay, so let's kind of fast forward here now just a little bit. First of all, I remember us making the trip back, once again, in a vehicle. We weren't flying back then, coming from the Dallas.
You flew out there the first time because I had to go pick you up at the airport.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should have made use of that Ferrari.
You're telling me you would have ridden in the truck this whole time? I thought I had to fly you places. Man, could have gotten us so much more studio time.
No, yeah, airplanes are great, and that's all nice and fine. But let me just say it like this: I would not ever trade those moments that you and I got to spend together on the trip back. I believe, not to put dirty laundry out there or anything of that nature, but we were all having some head trips kind of going on after some of the session work that went on out there at Sonic Ranch. There were just things kind of going on that needed to really we needed to hash out.
Well, Tipper's flared. That's the other thing, is that getting behind the curtain of the reality of like studio life is that a lot of times, and it goes to studio etiquette, it goes to psychology, but a lot of times things don't go well. And out there, they really didn't. I mean, we got great sessions done, we got everything else, but man, it was hard fought. There were lots and lots of disagreements between band members. There was lots and lots of like, how are we going to do this? Like, what if this record goes well and then we're all stuck together? I can't stand this guy, back and forth. And so that isolation kind of intensified the difficulties. And no, we didn't walk out feeling like, oh man, let's all hug. It was like, let's all get away from each other and breathe and then come back to the table with some clearer heads,
Absolutely. And, for what it's worth, I didn't recognize that was going on. You guys kept it hidden pretty well up until the trip back, and that's when you grabbed hold of me and it's like, hey man, would you mind getting in the truck with me and riding back? And it's like, well, heck yeah, I like the heck out of you, man. Let's go. And boy, some of the things that you kind of said to me were like, I had no idea, Josh, that this was going on. You guys have kept this really well hidden. To me, that's the apex of like total professionalism. At least, dare I say, on your part. There might have been other band members that might have been a little more vocal about it than you were. But look, you're a big dude. I would never cross you in the way that maybe some of these other guys were kind of getting up in your grill and kind of saying stuff that probably shouldn't have been said. Anyhow, off of the negative part of that.
Hold on, though. Back to the negative, because this is part of like that ugly thing that no one wants to talk about. But I think it goes to, and I remember those days pretty well, as far as I was embarrassed to be working in front of people like the studio owner, the A2, the other engineers and everything else. Of part of our role in being professional is to keep your voice down and do things right and come in. I mean, we're all just doing a job, and so trying to maintain that level of civility, even in times of like, I hate that chorus, it's terrible, why are we even going to record it? We're just going to redo it, and that's just awful, and can't you write a better riff than this, or back and forth, and just trying to keep that air of negativity out of the open air as much as possible was a challenge. But I think that that's something that needs to happen, because the studio is a very precious place. Like it's a place of feelings and emotions and things that people have conjured from their very heart of hearts, and they're coming in to attempt what is already a frustrating process. Like, even if you can hear it in your head, the process of channeling, that into what you want to hear on tape or disc or whatever you want to call it, that's frustrating enough, even if everybody is hunky-dory and awesome. It's hard enough to get great ideas the way that you hear them. It's hard enough to work through a session where something doesn't go wrong and something doesn't get frustrating. So walking into it with the right frame of mind and trying to preserve that safe space sort of mentality is paramount. And I feel like it's something that can also go by the wayside pretty quickly if you're not cognizant of it. It's real easy to get petty. It's real easy and man, it's as simple as one person can be that stick in the mud that everybody's mad at, and then the whole vibe goes just to crap. It's like, oh, we were all having a great time, and then all of a sudden John comes in and he just doesn't like the bass line, and so now he's pissed at the bass player, and then the drummer's pissed because he's going to have to retract the drum line. Now we're going to blah, 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 and then all of a sudden your day goes from, boy, we did great things, to why are we even here? How much money are we wasting? I'm going to be in the lobby, whatever. I'm going to go smoke, blah, 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 blah. And you're killing yourself and killing time. And music, by the way, is supposed to be spiritual. It's supposed to be the way that you record and the way that you capture. I'm a firm believer that goes onto that recording. If it's love, if it's anger, if it's hate, and sometimes you want those other emotions. It's not
Sure.
to say that everything has to be done with love, but those microphones pick up everything, all the way down to the way that you hold the guitar, the way that you play, the way that those words are inflected, how hard you hit the drums, like all that stuff. Don't negate the fact, don't overlook the fact that every little thing filters into making that recording. Recordings are mojo. I mean, it's about the moment. That's one of the things that when I first started, that's what I loved the most about being an engineer, was standing there as something awesome was captured. Like, holy crap, that solo is the one that we wanted. I can't even. And now years later, I listen back to it and I remember standing right there of like, oh, I remember when we cut that solo and it was just incredible. Remember, we went through 5 or 6 different blah, 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 blah. All of those things that you go through are captured, and so you have to keep that very sacred mindset to it. Approach it like it is that. I mean, we're going to church, man. We're getting this done. Let's all be in the boat together. Let's make sure that this. I mean, it's a moment of immortality, captured forever. Your grandkids will listen to that if you do things right and do your file backup listen. But Apple S, always. But no, not to joke. But yeah, that's a lot of the intangible part of studio etiquette and studio demeanor and the psychology of recording, that if you've never been in that situation before, it's something that you shouldn't discount. You should always, I'd take a great vibe and crappy gear over vice versa any day,
Okay, great point. Now, before we move forward, I'm going to check to make for sure that we're actually capturing all this.
If you forgot to push record,
yeah, I'm fired, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let me just double check, because sometimes goes wrong and like things will shut off and so on and so forth. So I'm gonna just double check everything. Okay.
Well, I'm gonna get some coffee.
Hey, so I'm gonna do another one of these just to make for sure, because I'll wind up having to, kind of do some editing along the way.
Well, luckily, you're good at that.
I'm getting better at it. All right, so I'd kind of like to pick up where you left off.
Okay.
Which is, knowing how to not only treat people, but some of the things that come up in the studio. I distinctly remember many a time, I'm going to go even further back in the days of the early 90s to the mid-90s. This is days that I was pretty heavily involved with a bunch of metal stuff, King Diamond, Merciful Fate. And I distinctly remember at one point there was a conflict going on between producer and drummer. And our boys, Sterling Winfield and I, we were actually sitting in the control room at the time when all of a sudden we recognized that there was about to be a major conflict about to happen. And it was over something super simple, but it was highly important all at the same time. All right, so drummer feels like something needs to happen here when the producer, who is overseeing the whole project, the whole thing, kind of goes, I don't want that there because this is going to happen there instead. Next thing I know, because these guys are gentlemen, it's like, you guys might want to take a trip out into the hallway while we hash this out. And luckily back then, since we were indoors, this was at Dallas Sound Lab. They had this really long hallway, and at least I was smart enough to have like an indoor frisbee that Sterling and I could throw up and down the hallway. And this went on for like 30 minutes, man. I mean, we're just sitting out there going, I wonder. Are we going to be able to finish this record?
Mom and Dad are fighting. We're just going to hang out here and kick the ball until they come get us.
Yeah, that's pretty much kind of what it was. And then eventually, someone comes out of the control room and go, okay, you guys can come on back in. Naturally, being the engineer, when you're working on a project for 6 months at a whack, you kind of want to know what's going on. And once again, with these guys being the gentlemen that they were, first of all, when you think about Merciful Fate, these guys are all European, and so, and I say that very respectfully because I highly look up to the European standards, especially for recording and things of that nature. Definitely not their first rodeo, and it was like, you kind of want to know what just happened. And it was just within a sentence. I mean, it was basically, we got it figured out. Don't worry about it. We're going to move on. And it's like, okay, I guess that's my bottom line is, am I going to be able to continue working on this record? Or are we going to call it quits? Because by the way, I've been on records where big name records where the artist comes in and they're pissed at the producer.
The bigger the name, the more common it feels like, because once everybody's kind of set in their ways, then everybody wants, things get more heated. It's a bigger game. There's more history.
It can be. And I guess it probably depends upon the personalities as well. Not to elongate this too awfully long, but I remember distinctly, walking in on a session at one point going, I know how things have been in earlier sessions for you. Lovey-dovey, hunky-dory, everything's just fine. But this today, you need to face forward. Don't say one word. Don't talk to this person. Don't look at them. Don't do anything. And even on that session, at one point, I was asked to, step out of the room. It's like, we need to hash this stuff out. I'll come get you when this is over. Well, I walked out of there, and I think I actually had enough time to take a nap. And when they came and got me, it's like, yeah, we're done for the day. Okay. Wow. Okay. So I guess my point is, behind all of that is that it is passion. It's, if we can all realize that we're all shooting for the end goal, which is to create art, to create music, something that people can remember for the rest of their days. I mean, I still remember in my childhood songs that came out that bring back great memories. I remember songs that came out that bring back very different memories. I don't want to say sad memories, but very different memories. I remember them as so on and so forth. It could be, oh, I remember what happened when I love this song, so on and so forth. All right, so the one thing that I do remember about the band days is that for me, this is where yours and my friendship was established. This is where I went, man, I freaking love Josh Robinson. I had no idea back during the band days, that Josh Robinson had such a passion for the recording arts. So much to the point to where you eventually wind up owning your own place. Now, there were things along the way that kind of were little give-me's, if you will, when I would come over and I would visit you, I would visit the band, because you guys housed together when you were a band, right?
Yeah, we did it full on, man. We this is how metal or not metal we were. When we moved to Dallas, we got a house that we shared out in one of the suburbs, Grand Prairie, and one of us took a job as a waiter because he had done that before, and the rest of us put our heads together and we figured we'd start mowing lawns. Just like, we got to get some money. Well, we put our money together. I'm not even kidding. We went to Home Depot, bought a $180 lawnmower and a weed eater, and started knocking on doors. And so we started mowing yards. And a friend of ours also worked in construction, so he ended up hiring a couple of us. We ended up being a drywall crew, basically, for a couple of months to make money and put towards studio time. But fast forward to after. Okay, so the tensions that you described whenever you and I left El Paso, and the interpersonal differences, eventually those bubbled over, and the band did not go the distance, obviously. But what I learned in that whole scenario was exactly how expensive studio time was, and exactly how approachable the technology was starting to be, i.e. you didn't need an SSL and a 2-inch tape machine anymore. You could get into a Pro Tools system. Mm-hmm. You could get in, and this was, early 2000s or so. Mm-hmm. So I started looking into that, and it's like, why have we been spending all this money for, studio time somewhere else? Buy the gear, find a room, and have unlimited access without the hourly clock running. So yeah, I believe we'll do that. So Skyline Studios was born.
That is amazing, of which, kind of backing up just a little bit on that even. I did not realize, because I was kind of caught up in my own little world of, trying to be an engineer, trying to, if you will, learn my ways as a producer, so on and so forth. So I find out about this, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was basically one day you called me up and you go, hey, I've moved on from what's going on with the band stuff. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm up to. And I'm shocked. I'm literally, in awe of what you've got going on. And I'm telling myself, here is a guy who is a go-getter. He's got great things in mind that he wants to do on down the road. In other words, what I'm saying, Josh, is that I saw entrepreneurship on your behalf early on. It was more than being just a band member. It was more than just having a passion for music. And by the way, for a lot of you folks that are out there, that's really kind of where it all starts. I think it is very fair to say that most of us got our start for the love of music. It's the universal language. It's the one thing that you don't have to know rules or have to know how to do something to have an appreciation for it. And the other thing that I've learned along the way is that, man, it doesn't necessarily have to be your cup of tea to have an appreciation for different kinds of music. It's a learning thing. It's the kind of thing that, for me, the example would be, hey, I might like pop music, but I might suck at recording pop music. I might love orchestral, but I may suck at recording orchestral. Some of the things that I've kind of learned along the way is that my cup of tea isn't necessarily the next guy's cup of tea. Yet at the same time, and by the way, this is something that Godby and I got into a discussion about, is that you may freaking hate what you're doing. You may hate the genre. It may not be your thing, but we can find ways to still bring that professional part of ourselves to the table and discover things that are intertwined amongst whatever it is that you may not care for all that much, and find creative ways to get involved in bringing that project or bringing that record to a professional level. At the end of the day, and this keeps coming up all the time. A lot of the folk that are in a part of AKB, they've already expressed this. One of the reasons why they wanted to get into the production side of things was they wanted to try to figure out why their stuff never sounded as good as the stuff that they heard on the radio. And they started learning very quickly that it has a lot to do with the time that you spend on something. And here's where I'm kind of going with that. In today's society, a lot of folk think that press a button, boom, magically you've got this amazing something or another. It definitely has gotten better, but it is the kind of thing that you're going to spend the time on it. You're going to spend the time on it.
So hold on. I got so much. I could just go on tangents for days at this particular point, but I'll try to get it condensed into a followable, not that that's even a word, train of thought. First off, when it comes to working on stuff that you don't dig, maybe it's not your cup of tea or anything else. For me, I mean, at Skyline, we recorded everything from Baroque ensembles, harpsichord and all the rest of it, all the way up to like the heaviest of death metal, all the way up to major label hip hop, all the way to reggae or this or that. And so for me, I found myself in kind of that Forrest Gump moment of like, how did I even get here? I'm in a huge church recording an opera singer in front of this, massive pipe organ, but I took it upon myself to mic the crap out of the dude and to make sure that it sounded so awesome and I actually like classical music. That's the other thing in my old age that I've learned is if it's not your cup of tea, it probably will be someday, because I'm a huge music lover, but I'll be the first to tell you that I don't listen to just one thing all the time. In the morning, it's one soundtrack. In the afternoon, it's different. At the end of the day, in the morning, it might be Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. If I'm working on the farm, it might be Old Country and Merle Haggard and stuff. Every different experience has its own soundtrack. Going to the gym or doing something aggressive, boy, turn on the Pantera, get some rock and roll going. Yeah. Or at the end of the night, if you just want to sit and chill, throw on some great classical, Chopin, really dark nocturnes. Don't go too deep into that, because at night, if you're in a quiet house by yourself, it might scare the crap out of you. I'm just saying, I've done it. Thought it was a great idea, and I was like, man, things are getting real eerie out here in the country. I'm going to have to go to a more major key. Moving on. But one, realize that there's beauty in almost any genre, or if it's something you're working with that you don't like the way it sounds, well, take it upon yourself to put something in there where you do like the way that it sounds. Put something in there. Find something in that project to focus on that you can actually turn around and be like, you know what? I am super proud of that kick drum track. I have never heard a, whatever genre it is, song that has better vocal effects that blend back and forth, and do something that you can put in where when you listen to it, you're like, that's my handiwork. I love that. Even if you don't like the song, you still put some awesome into it. And if the artist leaves happy, ultimately, that's what it's all about. So that was the first thing that I wanted to say about working in different genres. And secondly, and this is one of the biggest, like, I think the preconceived notion that whenever you start rolling, everything's magic and gold, that is the most disappointing and self-defeating philosophy ever. It actually needs to start from the other end of the spectrum, because, and this goes back to Tony Iommi, guitar player for Black Sabbath. I heard this quote from him years and years ago, and it struck me really true of, like, he said, and he's the riff master. I mean, he wrote Iron Man, Sabbath Bloody. I mean, get out of here. Started heavy metal. Like, you are so Tony Iommi's thing was, I write every day. He's like, I record, I write, and 90 to 95% of the stuff that I do is crap. So you just have to know when you're listening to your stuff, what's good and what's not. But don't go in with the expectation that if it doesn't sound great off the bat, you're awful. No, understand that it's almost like, sculpting. Like, you take a block of stone and you chisel away the suck until you get to the product that you really want, whatever it is you hear in your head. But don't walk into it of like, well, third take and it's still not right. I'm so frustrated. Like, go into it knowing that it's a process. It's a struggle. Like, getting recorded music with soul and feel and all those magical things that we've fallen in love with. I mean, sure, there are the stories of, we wrote that song in 2 hours and walked out and went to the bar and it was a massive hit. That does happen. But by and large, it doesn't work that way, and you and I both know it. It is a hard fought, from studio, actual technical stuff, to psychology, to everything else. Like, man, it's a struggle. Embrace the struggle. Take it as a challenge. Go into it and be self-deprecating and know that, like, I was just privileged to be there. I'm just happy to be here. I'll do whatever's necessary. If it doesn't work, we'll keep working until it does. Let's all smile and be happy and get going. It's about the way that you carry yourself, and it's about being realistic about struggle, about being realistic about problems. Something went wrong. Guess what? It always does. Oh, I'm having a horrible day because shut up. Fix it. No one cares. Your negativity, like, chaos is contagious. Negativity is contagious.
Oh, boy, is
Just
it.
be realistic and understand and bond with your fellow musicians. Bond with your engineers. The whole King Diamond story or whoever it was that was arguing in the studio, that's a lot of the job as well, is to... Some of the hardest things, and especially for young engineers that are out there, you don't have to have a huge studio and a huge desk to be put in these same situations. It could be, your mom lets you use the garage with your little USB interface, and you got a buddy who's going to come in and throw down a hip hop vocal on it, right? Same exact scenario. You've got an artist coming in. You want to capture him or her as solid as possible. You want to make a great track and everything else, but especially green folks that haven't done it a whole lot, he's going to come in and get frustrated, and you have to know, how to keep passes rolling. And, well, that was obviously a horrible take, but you can't tell him that. I think you've got a better one in you. Let's do it again. The advent of the DAW, whether it's Pro Tools or Logic or whatever your workstation of choice, you can keep laying takes on top of takes. Get a playlist going. Roll through a guitar solo. Well, that's your warm up. Okay, cool. Let's do it again. Lay it again. Lay it again. So keeping people happy in their, and not even just happy, but keeping them positive in their creative moment, and knowing how to coax a better performance out of someone, because everybody's super self-conscious. When it comes down to putting your emotions on the table, whether it's a solo, a vocal, a kick drum, or anything else, everyone is super, super self-conscious all the way up the chain. Even those multi-million-dollar performers, they got a lot on the line. They're super self-conscious. What if that gets out and everyone hates it? And so just keeping people in the right frame of mind, and how to tell them they suck when that's not the words that you can use. Like, that just wasn't a good take. You need to get your head focused. I know you got a better one in you. Ooh, that first part was awesome. Do that again and put it back with that second piece. Yeah. Oh, it's almost, and you can coach people. I'm getting chills just thinking about it. Like,
sure.
when you can coach someone into that performance, and at the end of the day, you're just listening back to it on 10 with it just blaring up like, oh, I can't believe it. Feels like you pulled magic out of the ether, whenever you get there together. It's just like, it's a magical experience that, once again, you don't have to have a huge SSL desk and 2-inch tape. You can have the tiniest little, hell, cut to your iPad or your phone. If you've got a microphone that you can open up and put some sort of signal into it, could be cowbell or it could be a Marshall stack, but anybody can be put in that same situation. So,
well, first of all, extremely, extremely well put. I have learned that myself, because I was brought up in the studio, and it's like, we're going to freaking stay here until we get that magic touch. You brought up something that I want to touch on here real quick. Where we are in today's society with DAWs, we have the capability of taking take after take after take after take, and we can go back through and make selections of this part, that part, combine the parts, make stuff happen. the magical parts, if you will. Combining those together, putting this together. Whereas back when you and I were doing this to tape, we had limited. First of all, we had limited real estate that we could do that with. It was very costly. A lot was on the line back then. And believe it or not, to this day, I still rub elbows with folks who are still thinking like that because that's what they grew up with. It's like, you missed the punch. Well, no, it's there. It's there. All I really need to do is I just need to stretch this back out. Even though I missed it, there's this thing called memory that it's sitting there in the cache of what's going on with all of this. Some of the most beautiful stuff that I've been able to talk with older engineers, guys my age, older, is that there's been this misnomer out there. It's like the old guys just can't get past analog tape. And believe it or not, I'm finding that not to be true. And because I've got these guys going, are you freaking kidding me? If people understood how difficult it was back then, I don't ever want to go back to that. I have no problem. You can get into the whole depths of, well, digital doesn't sound quite like analog. Okay, it's getting better. The things that I'm talking about are the capabilities of being able to edit, to go back and keep take after take after take, and finding that magic that you might be looking for. I'm going to bring up one example was on Don Henley's project. So I'm in Henley's place. I'm nervous as can be. I've never worked with the man. I've never worked with Stan Lynch. And Stan is like this just easygoing kind of guy. It's like, look, don't worry about it. The biggest thing that you need to be concerned about is that you've got his ears sounding beautiful when he steps in, because he's not going to be very patient about any of that. If it sounds like then you're going to have a problem, and he's going to let you know about it. Well, the beauty part of all of that was that after Don comes in for an hour or two doing vocals, so on and so forth, we've got a playlist that we can go through. And I got to sit down with Stan and he's asking me, little old me, my opinion about what I think about this. We have the opportunity to spend the time to pick out what is ultimately going to wind up being on the record. So here's where I'm going with it, is that, first of all, you nailed it. When it comes down to the passion that's there, and you're going to come across those issues where everybody is so passionate about it that you're going to have conflict from time to time. You're going to have those moments where you need to hash things out. You're going to have those moments where maybe things get heated, and I think you're absolutely right about that. Dare I say, what I would consider the newcomers kind of into the business, maybe they aren't aware that conflict does happen, and it happens on a daily basis. It happens probably more often than what you would think that it does. It's how you handle that and how you learn to get out of the way, if it's between band members, or if it's maybe even if it's between you personally and say the producer. At the end of the day, I usually think of myself as like, look, I'm a hired gun. I'm not going to speak until spoken to. I'm not going to give my opinion about anything. It's not my job to do that.
Boy, that's important.
If I get asked, then I'm going to be truthful about what I think about it. And I've learned, maybe this is just a part of getting older, but I've learned to, sometimes you've got to be blunt about things. Now, I totally agree. You don't want to walk up to somebody and just crush them right off the bat, especially if you don't know them all that well, and go, well, you freaking suck, and,
why are you here?
Go back home.
Scram.
But believe it or not, I've had those sessions where it's like, guys, I don't know quite how to say this, but you're not ready. I'm going to go back to Sterling Winfield for a second. He's had those sessions as well. We talked about the difference between a major label artist who is exceptionally well known versus your daily, what we're going to call the daily grind. This is a term that Godby used. He goes, the daily grind, man, that's where we actually make our living. This is where you come in, and it may not be everything and that in a bag of potato chips, so to speak. But there are times when you have to maybe tell your band or the group that has hired you to do a service for them, to be their right arm or whatever. And Sterling is very blunt about this. It's like there have been times when he's gone, hit stop and go, guys, you need to go back and you need to practice.
Yeah.
You need to get better.
It's about managing expectations, because that's the other thing, especially when you're working with green, younger artists. And, from the studio, like I said, we worked with all different strata of artists, but talking to younger artists and making sure when they book the time, like, okay, you guys have your pre-production done, songs are written, right? I mean, you can perform them, right? Especially like verses are written, words are there, lyrics are where they need to be, everything. Like, you guys are tight, you're ready to go. You could lay these songs down right now. Yes, if there's not all agreement of like, oh, yes, absolutely. We're all, even if they say that, they're probably still not where they need to be, unless you're in a band called Darth Vato. Look them up, kids, because those boys do their pre-production.
Oh, yeah.
But making sure that when you walk in, everything's ready, because that's the fastest way to eat up your studio time, is arguing over how many times you should play the chorus or something, that nobody likes this guitar part, or why did you change that here, or we'll just write it all in the studio. By the way, most expensive way to live ever, just ask Metallica. But if you don't have all your ducks in a row when you come in, your product is going to come out subpar. And it's going to be a much more painful process. And that's the bottom line, is that no matter what you do in life, anything, try to have your ducks in a row. Try to have all your stuff wired tight before you start. But especially when it comes to the studio, boy, that microscope is not forgiving at all. These microphones are great. They'll pick up everything. Yeah, the suck too. They'll get all of it. Like, everything that you do, whenever you come in there, it is, like we said before, it is an immortal record of what happens that day. So you might want to practice. You might want to have your stuff in line before those microphones open up and you realize that, like, oh, wow, that didn't sound that good. No, it didn't. You should have practiced. You guys should have sorted this stuff out before you had everyone else in the control room staring at you and you're listening back to it, which I would say, at least if you can listen to it and tell that it's not good, that's a good start. Because if you know that it sucks, then you know that you're not done yet. So knowing how to listen and knowing when you're done, and even, once again, tangent, you went by this a second ago, and I want to circle back, the whole taking multiple takes and playlists and things like that. It's good for the psychology side of things, yes. Just to be able to keep rolling. Hey, man, it's no big deal, because, when it's analog tape, we only got this much space. We're going to erase your last take. We're going to do it again. You're going to lose this, so this next one had better be better, because if we go down a rabbit hole and you can't recreate that, then you're told, oh my gosh, the pressure is so huge. So the multiple playlist thing and being able to take multiple takes is good. However, I'm going to go back to your boy Dime from Pantera on this, and I remember an interview with him where he was talking about back in the day before Auto-Tune and before Pro Tools, and I heard Sterling use the term on one of your earlier podcasts, fast fooding your music, and just, hey, we'll take 2 notes here, 2 notes here, 2 notes there. You need to be objective about it and realize that sometimes mistakes and quirks and idiosyncrasies, I think Dime's exact quote was, he would rather hear that guy at the end of the song reaching for that one note, and he doesn't quite get there, but you can hear the pain and the struggle. I mean, Auto-Tune would just Auto-Tune would just smooth it right out and just fast food the crap out of it. But that one screaming, reaching, and not quite there note has more tension and more passion than all of the auto-tuning and Pro Tools crapping ever. So you need to be able to understand that, like, sometimes those little nuances and the little, like, the noises and the things that, slippery slope, get your ear on and know what's cool and what's not. But, man, listen to the White Stripes. Listen to a lot of the music that's being done today. A lot of the fun is leaving in some mistakes to give it personality,
Wow, man, you just blew my doors off. I get chills when I think about this. So going back to the Dime thing, I remember when we were on the Far Beyond Driven record, this is Sterling and I both, Terry Date coming to me and going, I need for you to de-noise, meaning take some of this stuff out. And of course, kind of coming from the pop background prior to being on that particular record, that was a stretch for me. What do you mean exactly take the noise out? And he had to sit me down and explain to me, some noises are very good noises. You might not think that they are. So if you've got a question as to whether I want to keep this or not, And now, once again, this is going back to the analog days. Do I get rid of this, or do I leave it, kind of thing? And that's, honest to God, man, I think this is where I grew my pair of balls, was hanging out with Terry Date, is learning the difference between what is keepable. You just nailed it. Sometimes those noises will express something that you're not ever going to get back if you remove it.
It's human.
It's human. And that really taught me a lot. Sometimes it's a really good idea to make those decisions. Now, I don't want to get off on this whole tangent. Sometimes it is better to leave things until another day, another time, so on and so forth, where you can talk through these things with the guys in the band, or maybe the executive producer, maybe, I don't know. But this leads me to another thing that I want to ask you what your take is on. We'll fix it later. Okay, so this opens up a can of worms that I freaking despise, and I say that because I've been in on those sessions that they want to fix everything later on, and I'm going, no, there's no time like the present than to go ahead and get it captured exactly the way that we see fit for it to be captured. In other words, here's where I'm going with it. And I've brought this up on other podcasts as well. The difference between 0.2 dB of the bottom snare mic compared to, hey, let's just combine the freaking snare mics together onto one track. If it sounds great today, it's going to sound great tomorrow. It's going to sound great a week from now, a month from now, a year from now. If it sucks right now, let's fix it.
Move the microphone. Like if it sucks right now, do something right now in this moment to put that microphone in a better position to make it fit better with the kit or anything else. You know, the whole.
Yes.
Not to cut you off. I'm sorry. Continue.
No, all I was saying is that I remember those days as sitting in there with the band. I've had many a session where, you know, everyone's there in the band, and the drummer wants to hear more cymbals. Well, that might not be the better idea, because he's listening with one set of ears, whereas everyone else is listening with a different set of ears. You always need to have the one person who can be totally objective. That's called the producer. That is literally taking the responsibility for how the project is going to turn out. I get asked this quite a lot. What if you're the engineer, the producer, and in some cases even the artist, the talent? And usually what I tell people is, look, this is a very, very difficult situation to be in. I do not like being all of the above, because it's very, very hard to be objective. It's very hard to pull yourself from one section over to the other, wearing all the hats all at one time. And by the way, this is one of the reasons why I'm a teacher at a technical school. And one of the things that we have these students do is we have them do a couple of projects. This is in post-production. They're dealing with picture as well as audio that basically they recreate the audio for the picture. And what I tell these students, I go, look, don't be all of the above. Don't be the producer. Don't be the engineer, and damn sure don't be the talent. Well, why is that? Because, we've got limited people that we can pull from, so on and so forth. I think I want to do this at home. I don't want to do this here, so on and so forth. And it's like, if you do that, you're making 101 mistake. 101 mistake is that you're trying to wear all these hats. You're not prepared to do that. I can probably, out of the millions of people that might be in the audio world, I can pick maybe 5 that can do that and do it well. And I can guarantee you they did not get there in one sitting. It was years and years and years of experience and knowing when to say enough is enough. This is the best that it's going to be. I got to walk away. And or going, hey, I really suck at this. I need to get someone else in here to to give me not only an opinion, but to give me some direction
Right.
towards things.
And being humble enough to step in at that point, just a quick, fun interlude on the knowing when to take your hands off of it kind of thing. We were tracking a metal record for a band called Malevoler that was on my label, and they wanted to start with a brass ensemble. I was a tuba player when I was in high school, and so here I am, the producer of this record, and actually your daughter had a tuba. I was like, well, this is perfect. I'll just borrow her tuba and cut these tuba parts real quick, and in my brain, it was just this awesome, like, that's going to be so much fun. And then I got the tuba, and it had been 15 years, and I realized that my embouchure was terrible. It couldn't stay in tune. It was awful, and I'm sitting there playing tuba with Brian, the lead singer, on guitar, trying to play this classical etude, and it's just like cats getting killed. And we made through one take, and he's like, so how attached are... I'm like, oh no, that's terrible. We're going to have to call in brass players because this was a great idea. But turns out everything's sharp or flat, and I smoke cigarettes. Now I'm out of breath. And so this whole tuba thing was a foregone conclusion and pretty crazy. So you have to take your ego and your emotion off of it and make decisions for the good of the record or for the good of the song. You know, if something's not working, you need to be big enough to step back and objectively look at it and say, man, we really need to either call in some players or rewrite that part. It goes to fixing things in the mix, because you hit on that, and I'm just like, oh, I got so much to say, because it's the procrastination side of like, oh, sounds like crap now, but we'll just fix that later. Let's keep blazing. What's going to happen is you're going to get to the mix process. You're going to realize you got a steaming pile of crap, and you're either going to have to recut or just completely eliminate things. And you're going to regret it. You're screwing yourself, period. And for me, having been on both sides of it, when you leave that day with, you know, a board mix, a daily mix, or anything else like that, oh, that sounds awful, I can't even listen. Well, then that's your cue to fix that stuff and get it right, because you and I also both know that recordings, and this is going to be a very volatile statement, recordings should be easy. You should be able to set microphones in front of a really good sound source and get your gain right and get everything going, and then you just push record and everybody does what they're supposed to do, and it just kind of mixes itself. You know, I mean, the most magical times that I've seen, you have a great band, you get them captured really well, and people think there's all this smoke and mirrors. Oh my gosh, you got to... No. The better the recording, the easier it is to mix. And that's
Absolutely.
the bottom line. The better the recording, the easier it is to mix, because really, whether it's in a live scenario or a studio scenario, if all those players are doing what they're supposed to do and all those microphones are doing what they're supposed to do, you ought to have everything just about at unity and just be sitting back there feeling like you're magically watching it happen, you know?
Yeah.
So,
well, once again, extremely well put. We touched on this with John Congleton. There is a point in time, and once again, I tell my students, look, there's a gazillion different ways to go about doing this. My way may not be your way. The way that I like to do certain things may not be exactly what you had in mind. But if you can be open-minded enough to literally get the technicalities out of the way right up front. By the way, you know, this is why we have setup. This is why you go through, you get sounds first.
Pre-production.
It's pre-production. I think of setup as kind of a pre-production type thing. It's almost like, if you want to think of it like this, it took a long time for me to understand that you get the hard stuff out of the way. And when I say hard stuff, things like, what's it going to cost? How long are we going to be here? Do you want to get paid now or do you want to get paid later? Get all the crap out of the way so that you can be literally an artist at that point. And man, I think that you really said this very, very well. When you can sit back, you're in record, and you can just have this appreciation for getting to experience what is going on out in that recording room. You're and by the way, I mean, this happened day after day when we were up at Studio X with you guys up there when this was going on. Was there work that had to be done? Sure. But the one thing that I was grateful for that you guys did as a band was we did rough mixes at the end of every day so that we could go back to the place where we were staying and as a collective group have a discussion about, you know, what can be better, what needs to be worked on, what, you know, and it literally, I feel like it helped each and every individual whether we liked one another or not, it helped every individual to be better the next day when we walked in. What needs to be addressed? What do we need to take a look at? But the kind of going back to the whole fix it later type thing, I have found through my years of doing this, fixing it later is just this super large headache at the end of it. And I used to say it like this: look, you're going to pay me now. You can go ahead and pay me now, and we'll get it right while we're here, or you'll wind up paying me later to fix all this stuff. In which, by the way, it's much more expensive to pay me later because I'm going to have to spend so much more time on this to fix it. And I that word. I really hate that. What do you mean fix? Well, this could be that, or it could be this, or it could be, how about, let's make use of what we have in front of us right now at the moment. Once again, kind of going back to John, we got into this whole discussion about back in the days of analog, back in the days of large format consoles, which, I've got a lot to say about that as well. Large format consoles. So right now, as we speak, I've been exposed to X amount of DAWs, or shall we even say large format consoles that also act as DAWs. We've got one sitting in this other room over here, which I love the company itself, but there have been times when I've gone, these console manufacturers are just trying to keep up with the Joneses. They're trying to keep up with one another, who's the better of blah, blah, blah. And I go, why don't you just give me a console that does one thing really, really well? It's got buttons and knobs on it. Does it mean that I have to use all of them? No, it doesn't. I need to bring in good, clean signal. If I want to EQ it and EQ it going to what we would call tape, if I want to EQ that signal path going to whatever the capturing device is, I've got the capabilities of doing that. If I see fit to leave it alone, I can leave it alone. And then to bring that signal back on a set of faders, and like you said, how about unity gain, for crying out loud? I think you know this. Josh. I tried to record the way that I want to hear it with faders sitting at unity.
Yep.
I tell my students, look, unity gain, what does that mean? Unity gain, I'm getting nerdy on us here. Unity gain means what is coming into that channel is also going out that channel. There is, quote unquote, no gain change.
Right.
And it is beyond me to, and this kind of goes back to the analog days where it's like, oh, you got to press that signal as hot as you can because you're going to tape, and that tape has got noise on it. And without that signal being super hot and blah, 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 you're going to have a noise factor that's involved with it. We don't live in that day and time anymore. And so it is, I've been asked this before. Why are your cymbals? Why does that waveform look so small comparatively to everything else? And it's like, well, freaking take a listen to it.
Because that's how loud it's going to be in the final mix. It's not up front like the vocal.
Yeah.
It's a wispy little sound in the background that needs to be about, when you look at your waveforms, like, why is that acoustic guitar so small? Because acoustic guitar, one, is going to cut through like crazy. Mm-hmm. You don't want it to be, first, and it could be any instrument, but you don't have to make your waveforms look like 2x4s just to make sure you're squeezing every last little bit out of it, because that's not the way that things sound natural.
So detrimental.
And as far as one note on the unity gain, having things sound natural, not fixing it in the mix or whatever, I feel like if you get to that point where you're just sitting back and listening to it and things are rolling, more or less at unity the way that you want, you can be more objective about what the song needs. You can focus on the music and not get so caught up into like, oh, is that the right knee on that compressor? Is this here? How should I do this? Because if you're going through the tracking phase and while they're playing, you're too busy freaking out about something technical, you're not doing them a service by making sure that the song is as good as it can be, making sure that, yes, you want everything captured correctly, but once again, if you get it solid mm-hmm. and do your work right, you should be to the point where you can focus on the material and focus on capturing it. Maybe as you're listening, you're like, you know what, that guitar tone is a little bit aggressive. Maybe we should try backing this off or placing this differently, because when everything is more or less in place, that one thing is going to stick out like crazy. Mm-hmm. That's where you find out, is that noise good or not? If you take your dailies home and listen to them, like, man, all I can hear is the rattle of the hi-hat stand. That's just, blah, 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 blah. Little things like that will really stick out of a mix that is already pretty much correct. Those problems will let you know when they need to be addressed. But once again, you have to get your bed made the correct way where you can pick up the smaller differences.
So I want to touch on that with you for a second too. So once again, kind of going back to, I think it was John. It might have been Chris Godby. No, I think it was John Congleton. So like one of his methods of listening is being able to take it, turn it down low, and have it as background. This was something I had to learn. Yeah. I had to learn this, and I think the discussion that we had about that was let it be something that you would do in your daily grind. In other words, most of the time, I think most of us, unless we're in this super intense listening moment, and for me. To me, the most intense listening moments are in a very sterile environment. It's in a control room. You're paying attention to every little detail that's going on. But day in, day out, when I'm mowing the lawn or when I'm driving in my car, so on and so forth, I am not thinking about that hi-hat stand making noise. I'm listening with a different set of ears. I'm listening with a different mindset. I'm listening as a listener. I'm listening as just a human being. How does this piece of music make me feel? As opposed to, oh, did you hear that? Oh, wasn't that great or wasn't that freaking horrible? Now, I think that there's both sides to the coin. There are going to be those moments where, yeah, we've got to pay attention to this because it's bugging the crap out of me. I keep hearing this over and over and over. And, once again, by the way, if you hear it once and it's in the background that you've been listening to this and it sticks out and it presents itself as being maybe a problem or something that needs to be addressed, you know what? It doesn't magically go away. It probably is something that needs to be addressed. John really said it very, very well, that what he tries to get a lot of the people that he works with, he tries to get them out of that mindset of microscopic listening. And I've had to learn this as well, that we're not always, most of the time, we're not in a microscopic environment. We're not in an environment that is so squeaky clean that you can hear everything that's going on. As a matter of fact, just as a little side tangent, when I'm at home and I'm with the wife, I'm not allowed to listen to music at high volumes. It drives my wife nuts. I've only got one person in my family who is she's kind of like me. She's like freaking. I just disclosed who it is, but she's like freaking turn that up. I feel aggressive right now, and I want to listen to it as loud as I can get this without it going into distortion. Freaking love that kiddo for being who she is. By the same token, when we are with my wife, and it doesn't matter whether it's at home or in the car or whatever, turn that down. Why do you have to have it so loud? And it's like, I'm listening with a whole different set of ears than you are. You're having an appreciation, which I need to learn how to do this. You're listening to it for how this piece of music makes you feel. Oh, I love that piece of music. That's great. I don't really understand how you're hearing that piece of music right now because we've got road noise sitting over the top of this, which, once again, there's different buttons that can be pushed on individuals. I'm the kind of guy who, if I'm in the car and I've got music sitting down at a low volume and I've got a squeak in the car or something rattling in the car, I will pull over and go find it and destroy that noise, because it is driving me nuts.
Same here.
I don't know if you're that way or not.
Absolutely. I've pulled over just to search for whatever squeak, and it's something in the passenger side pocket, a piece of metal that was touching something else. It's like, if that squeak doesn't stop, I'm going to lose my mind. I guess maybe it's a lifetime of listening for squeaks and noises.
Sure.
It's like, if it's in my control, I'm going to find it. But as far as the listening thing, and I don't know, listening to you talk about it just made me think about it in a maybe it's an abstract kind of way. So go with me on this. But if you've ever been in the car with someone who maybe is driving erratically. And, in the driver's seat, if you're hauling ass and moving lanes quickly and everything else, well, you're in control and it feels okay. If you're in the passenger seat, it's like, bro, slowly, you're scaring the shit out of me. We got to blah, blah, blah. Same thing with music. My wife is actually, we're kind of the opposite because as metal as, I've been and love all sorts of, she listens to her stuff loud AF all the time, just blares. And it's everything from pop music to sometimes metal and Rage Against the Machine to EDM, techno or whatever. But when you're in the environment, if you're not the one driving, her loud music makes me want to punch kittens. It's just like, oh my God. If you're not of that same mindset, if you're not there keyed into that moment, like, oh yeah, somebody else's loud music can piss you off. Your own loud music is great. It's like a fart. Nobody minds there, but whatever, moving on. So there's a time and
Never
place.
heard it expressed that way,
Well,
but that's awesome.
That'll be on the cutting room floor. But the truth is, whenever you're in control of the volume and whenever you're right there, it's like, oh, great. For the person on the side that maybe isn't driving the car, they're just white knuckling the handle and saying, pull this car over right now. I don't want that much hi-hat in my guitar mix or whatever. So.
No, that's great.
I'm just saying, I don't know.
No, that's great. That is totally great. All right, so kind of moving on a little bit, and understand, Josh, that I'm hoping to have you back at some point. All of the guests that I have on AKB, we have so much to say and so much to talk about that I don't expect to get it all in at one time. And I've already mentioned to you something that I have that I'm about to unveil for AKB, what we are affectionately calling Phase 2 here soon. And I've approached you on this. But kind of moving on down the road. So, talking about when you started discovering that, look, I think I want to be involved at a much deeper level than just being a band member or being in a band, being a musician. What was your deciding moment of that? Was it it's affordable? I want to not only make a go of this, but I feel like I can make a difference. I guess the question would be, when was it that you made the decision that, look, I want to be a studio owner. I want to be a producer. I want to do this. I want to do all of these things.
It all started, I got my first guitar in, man, I hate to go back that far, but 1985. And
Okay.
So I've been a musician my whole life. Of everything in my life, guitar and music has been the most constant as far as it's always there. And so when I played in the band, I got, I wouldn't say overwhelmed, but I got really, really fascinated by all of the different aspects of what it takes to make a great record. And working with you and going to huge studios, like walking into a studio not understanding what all of the tools are. It's just knobs for days and wires. And oh my gosh, it's like an airplane cockpit. I have no idea, but I want to learn. Mm-hmm. So as I talked about earlier, spending a ton of money, like lots and lots of money on studios and studio time and watching the way that it works. For me, it was, how can I take that technology or those abilities and make them accessible to me where I can do this all the time. And I guess in short, your answer is, I wanted to be able to create music and I wanted to be able to understand the whole picture top to bottom, where I didn't need to, find a studio and employ them to be able to make music, to have to call someone else to run this piece of gear because I didn't know how to do it. I wanted to be able to create, and I didn't even have the false notion that, I'm going to make major label quality records here right in my bedroom. It started out as a understanding of the process, wanting to be able to make demos that would then be taken into a proper facility, cut to 2-inch on a Neve or an SSL and gone all the way to the top. So it started as just the desire to want to capture. I just wanted to be able to score. I wanted to be able to capture. I wanted to be able to understand the process. And then all these years later, it's just I feel like you could spend your whole life doing it and still learn something brand new on your last day on the job. It's something that you can't know everything. You can always be put in a new situation. You can always have a new challenge. There's always more music to be written. It is a lifetime of learning. It's a lifetime of performance. It's a lifetime of passion. If you really love music and you really love getting into it, well, you want to know all the nuts and bolts of it. You want to know the top to bottom. How was that made? Find your favorite records. And this is actually a tangent. Whenever I was driving in today, I was thinking about one of the most important things. We talked about knowing when it's good enough, or knowing when to be, okay, that was a great take. A lot of young engineers coming up, what you need to do, what you need to understand, what do you like? Listen to your favorite records. Figure out when that guitar tone is good enough, or that kick drum, or that this, or that. It's not about the tools that you use. It's about your ear. Sterling, our buddy Sterling, he told me one of my favorite things ever, which was, I think Roger Nichols might have taught him this, but it's like, where do you want to mic that bass cabinet? Well, walk up to it, poke one finger in one ear, and put your ear down in front of it. And with ear protection, kids, if you're standing in front of a loud cabinet, don't blow your ears out. But ultimately, put an ear down there, figure out what that microphone is going to grab, and move it until it sounds correct. And here's another big thing, don't process and EQ the crap out of your signal just because you have to. Slap a mic on it and open your EQ and make it sound good. No. Slap a mic on it, go into the control room or onto your headphones and listen to it. And if you don't like what you hear, move the microphone, change the amplifier, different guitar, do something organic. Don't do it all in the box, because ultimately what you capture, the less manipulation, the better. It's the purity side of things. If you get in a habit of just, well, let's throw on the old casual channel strip and 2 compressors and this right here and then a gate and then a verb, because that's what I do on every signal. No. You're getting into habit, and it's coloring what you're capturing, even if you know it or don't. If your bag of tricks is let's do this and throw this same EQ on there, then you have just adulterated and changed that artist's music, or even if it's your own. Don't get stuck in your ways. Listen to things, move the microphone, and embrace the purity of the capture, not so much the in-the-box finger, constantly working it.
To me, Josh, not to cut you off, but to me, that is the art. That is the art part of that's the art part of being a really good engineer. That's the artful side of it, is knowing when to leave crap alone, knowing when to not alter things. Godby talked about this as well, talking about, double compression, triple compression, this and that, and so on and so forth.
It's multiplicative.
So, it's the kind of thing to where what we were talking about is learning how to do things. So things that were not available back in the early 2000s, the 90s, definitely in the 80s, was we didn't have the capabilities of going to YouTube and figuring out how things were done. And I've asked this question before. That is that is the information. I asked this actually to Robert Bogart, who he's considered a millennial because of his age and so on and so forth. He's a very, very sharp guy, but yet at that, he still has those questions. And the question that I posed was, the information that you get out on YouTube, is it good or is it bad? And the answer that came back was, well, there is good and bad. The only problem with it is knowing when to say when. Can you do this? Yeah, you can do this. But is it the best thing for the record, or is it the best thing for the situation? And I digress. I go back to things like kick drums and snare drums, for example. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that's the easiest thing in the world to record, because it's not. When it comes back to the old school ways of doing things, the one thing that usually gets manipulated, gets manipulated the hardest on my end, is a drum kit, because it's really pretty necessary for a lot of the stuff that I do. And I'm talking about EQ to compression to gating to all of those things. But to this day, some of the best kick drums and some of the best snare drums that I've ever heard, that at least the ones that I've done, they don't have double compression on them. They don't have 3 kick drum mics on them. They don't have, 3 snare mics on the snare. It might be 1 kick drum mic and 1 snare mic. And yeah, It's going to be manipulated EQ-wise, so on and so forth. And, of course, a lot of the stuff that I tell the kids today, look, if that microphone is working properly, you're not going to need to add to it. You're going to need to take stuff away.
It's another big lesson.
When you do it, subtract. Don't add to.
And I just want to cut in right there. I'm so sorry, but I have to throw this in there. When I worked at Gypsy Tea Room back in the mid-2000s or so, Tommy DeBaudry, great friend of mine, incredible engineer. He was our front-of-house guy. I mean, he mixed everybody from Willie Nelson to Snoop Dogg to not that there's mixing Snoop Dogg. It's a stereo in. Come on, it's an audio joke. But Robert Plant and all of the big names, he would come through. So obviously his pedigree is without question. I mean, I watched him make that room sound better than the touring engineer. When a big band would come through and they've got their own high-powered engineer, but that guy would come in and he'd listen to Tommy's mix. He's like, you know what, you got this. I don't feel the need to, when you watch somebody who's on the clock just to make sure, and they sit back of like, you know what, you know this room better than I do. I'm going to let you dial it in because this is your home. That should tell you what kind of guy Tommy was. But we had that talk one day. He said, the thing is, what I try to tell all these new engineers is that always cut and very rarely boost, and you and I both know how much, that 2 dB of one thing can totally throw your balance off. Throwing extra signal into something like I had no idea that, a 1 dB boost on the kick drum during that chorus was completely going to sit on the bottom end and make everything else totally out of whack. Pulling out the things that are unpleasant leaves so much more room for the pleasant things to blossom. And to really come to light, that trying to boost everything just kind of muddies the picture, and it just makes everything so much more claustrophobic feeling, and things don't have the space and the air that they need to breathe. So that's your lesson, kids: cut, don't boost. Period.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that we teach, whether they like it or not. Even in the class that I have, I'm dealing with post production. I'm dealing with students who are probably have been there for, good 30 weeks already by the time that they hit the doorstep of my particular class. And I know that they get tired of hearing this. But the one thing that I see over and over and over is that I see this constant, well, it's there, so I might as well make use of it, and go in and see like EQ curves that would just, stifle the Pope. It's like, are you freaking kidding me? Why do you feel the necessity to do that?
Because it's
well,
there.
This is what I learned okay, so that's just one person's viewpoint on, it's not the same situation. It's not the same thing. It's not the same microphone. The one thing that I definitely have been trying to get across to the newcomers is that consistency, that if I were to ever use one word, be consistent. And that goes from your microphone selection. Even if it's a bad decision, the one thing that will screw you over so quick is changing midstream. Going in, I don't like the way that snare drum sounds. I'm going to change microphones. You're halfway through the record, dude. Why would you want to do that? And so it definitely is one of the things that I preach to these guys coming through my classes, like, it's okay to use a large diaphragm condenser microphone for your ADR. It's fine to use a shotgun mic for your ADR. If you see fit to use an SM7 for your ADR, okay, that's fine. But whatever you do, stick with it. Don't go changing in midstream, because you know what? It's going to wind up costing you not hours, but days worth of your time. And the folk that I have coming through my doorstep, it is pretty fast and furious. They'll tell you right off the bat, it's like, oh man, I didn't know I was getting into this. And it's like, yeah, this isn't for just music lovers. You guys need to be aware that if you're going to be a staple in the production community, you have to know your stuff. And the biggest thing that I could ever exude out to you is that you've got to be consistent. Now, that being said, we also have the capabilities of which we used to not have this readily available to us, is the thing of recall. Being able to go into Pro Tools and go, this is where I left off. This is the plugin that I had on there. This is, this is where I was. Okay, that's great. That's great. So why would you want to change it midstream if that were the case? We used to not have that luxury being on large format consoles. Even though you had a recall, that you could recall where your settings were. Okay, so that's all great and fine, but you still had to manually go in and turn those knobs to be where they were to set it all up. That took time to do that. If you had a 48-channel mix going on, per se, and you needed to reset the console for whatever the reason might be, and this stuff happened all the time. It was not unlikely that you're going to spend an hour resetting. And I've done a lot of thinking about this. I spend a lot of time on the road. I spend typically on a daily basis, and I wish I could get that time back, but I can't. On average, this is nothing new to you, but driving from where I live to North Dallas on pretty much a regular basis, I'm spending 2.5 hours every morning to get to where I can go to work. And when you start getting my age, you start thinking about, holy moly, man, this is time I could be spending doing this or this, whatever that might be. And this is time I'm not going to get back. I'm going to turn this into, if you're thinking about production, if you're thinking about having to do a setup, if you're having to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, consistency definitely comes to mind. Where why would you want to have to reinvent the wheel when it's all said and done?
Why would you want to retrack stuff? That's the issue, because I don't know if you remember this or not, but there was a night where we left, and when you and I worked in the studio on the band project together, it was, we taped off the microphones as far as the stands to where we knew they were still in place, and we got recall sheets on where all the knobs were set, and everything was captured, blah, blah, blah. But there was a night where, and this is something as simple as this, but the drummer had gotten up the night before from his kit and hit the snare mic and knocked it like 3 inches or 2 inches back. And as a result, the signal coming through was so light that the next day, whenever we started, nobody noticed it. We get, a track in the can. It's like, oh, that's great. Where's my snare mic? Oh my gosh, it's got no signal to what? Oh, right. Because you didn't catch the consistency, not you, but we missed the fact that a microphone had gotten moved or something wasn't correct. Like you change that microphone or do something different. In that moment, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But when you listen to the whole big picture, half of the Mona Lisa's lips are a different color because you just swap that out real quick, and now it doesn't make sense anymore, and now it's really obvious, and so you either have to retrack it or live with it, and that's not where you want to be.
No, it definitely is not. I go back to the days of the King Diamond and Merciful Fate. We this is going to bring up some negativity, and I don't want to stay there for too long, but we made it a point, especially by the time that we got to the mid-90s, where we were in the studio for 6 months. And there were days where you would spend not hours, but days tracking the same instrument. And it was down to the point of, hey, those strings are beginning to sound a little bit dull on the bass.
Absolutely.
We had to go in and manually write down every little detail of that channel, what it was plugged into, what the EQ might be, so on and so forth. And it is very fair to say that the assistant who was taking it haphazardly through all of this, I wasn't expected to write all this stuff down. That's why you have an assistant. There's a lot to be said for being able to trust that assistant to do the right thing, to make for sure that details are taken care of. And it just so happened that this particular thing, and you never think that it's going to come back on you. This is something that I've learned as well. Don't think that something's not going to get uncovered. If you don't pay attention to it, when you least expect it, you're going to be asked to go back to here. And, oh crap, I didn't do this. Ooh, now we've got a problem. All of this to say that, this is probably 96 when this all happened. We found inconsistencies in the note-taking that was going on. We didn't have what we have today where you've got Pro Tools. It's just easily, pulled back up and so on and so forth. This was literally having to write every little detail down and found these inconsistencies that were going on. And it ultimately led to this guy's demise because he was fired. He was fired off the job. And beautiful for me, Sterling was the replacement for it. I called him up and it's like, hey, dude, we lost this guy. He has been relieved of his duties.
Job. Yeah.
And hey, would you consider coming in and finishing this out with me? He's like, yeah, man, let's do this. And so came in the rest of the time that we were there, but it wasn't without its drawbacks, because we had to go back. And I know people find this really hard to believe, but when we first started some of those records, we would go in, we would get the sound, and we would not only lock it down visually where we wrote everything down, but we would make a CD of the drum kit. Okay, what's it sound like as a whole kit? What's it sound like individually? Kick drum, 30 seconds of kick drum, 30 seconds of snare drum, 30 seconds of hi-hat. It didn't matter what it was. We're going to capture this so that we've got a reference point to go back to, of which, by the way, and it drove me crazy. It definitely took a lot of the fun out of it, but it was a necessary thing to have happen to be, quote unquote, consistent. And whether people like it or not, people are very, very quick to make judgment on, I could have done a better job at engineering this or that. We also have to learn to let that crap fall, just kind of roll off your back, so on and so forth. And it's like, I've read comments about, I thought so-and-so was a better engineer on, earlier records of King Diamond, so on and so forth. Okay, that's great. That's fine. You learn to let go of all that stuff. First of all, because that person was not there at the time. Had they been there and literally gone through what we went through, this is no joke. I do remember the days of us literally spending the first hour and a half to 2 hours every day going, let's double check this kick drum. Let's double check the snare. Let's double check the hi-hat. Once that was all done, we could move on to bass. Guess what? We did that on the bass. We did that on the guitars. We did that on the vocals. We did it on everything that was a part of that record. And this was a daily event that took place. Where I'm going with it is that it becomes exceptionally consistent. And so the mix process became kind of a no-brainer. If it works on this song here, chances are the movements that we're going to have to make on the next one are minimal. And this is with, so different solos, different this, different that, choosing different cabinets, so on and so forth. And it literally got down to a point to where mixing now all of a sudden becomes artful once again. You can enjoy what's going on.
Because you did your legwork right up front.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I guess that's my whole point, being super long-winded about it, is that you're going to pay the price for it at some point or another. So you might as well take care of it right up front. Are you liking it now? Yeah. Okay. Well, you're going to like it tomorrow, probably. You're probably going to like it, unless you've blown your ears out over the nighttime. And this is something that everybody that I've talked to so far, we differ in our engineering, not capabilities, but the way that we go approach things. But at the end of the day, it still kind of comes down to, we're all ultimately shooting for the same goal, and that is for that record or whatever the project might be to be the very, very best that it can be. Minus, if the band's sucking, okay, that's when you've got to call it and kind of go, guys, and I've even had that happen within the last couple of years. It's like, I've gotten to the point, Josh, to where, one of my first questions that I ask somebody when they walk in the door, if I don't know who they are, one of my very first questions, and I learned this from Sterling, by the way, is, what is your end goal? What is it that we're trying to accomplish here? Do you have a purpose for coming in? Are you doing this? Are you doing this as a demo? Are you doing this because you want to put this out to the public? Oh, you don't have a plan.
Right.
Well, maybe now's not the time for you to be darkening the doorstep.
That begets the biggest question. As a recording studio owner, I had that conversation so many times with clients of, like, what's the end goal? What are you guys going? Oh, we're going to make a CD. Okay, well then, I mean, who's going to buy it? What are you going to do? I don't really. You got mailing list, or how are you going to find your people? And this was even back before the internet, and as it was coming around, well, how are you going to mobilize your fans to buy this CD? I mean, is it going to go into stores? Well, no. You're going to sell it at shows? Well, yeah, but you got 15 people that come out to shows, so that's not going to, if you're going to make this product, if this is why you're going, I mean, you're making an audio recording, capturing all this stuff, then what are you going to do with it to really make it? And then 9 times out of 10, it's just going to be somebody's coaster. It's going to sit underneath, on a bookshelf next to somebody, give it to your friends and your family, and that's all neat, but you didn't have a plan. And so even if you made a great record, people are under this, the guys that, we'll just make a monumentally great record and then we'll be famous after that. No. A great record can sit on a shelf just like a turd. It doesn't really matter if you don't. And this entire line of discussion is going to have to be for a whole nother episode.
Sure.
But how to take and monetize your music and how can you actually make it in the music business these days? Making it in the music business now does not mean what it used to mean. Well, we're going to get a major label deal and then the bus is going to pull up in front of the house and then we're going to go on a huge tour. It's a completely different playing field. And if you don't have a business mind for what you're going to do with these awesome creations, if you can't get your awesome creations to the people who want and need to hear them, then you're still, you're making sound in a forest with nobody to hear you. It might be incredible sound, no ears, it's still no sound,
Yep. Well put. Well, listen, I know that we're getting towards the end of our time that we get to spend together. Hey, can I ask you to come back and join us for some more discussion on some of this stuff? We've got tons to talk about.
I would be honored.
I cannot thank you enough for coming today, taking time out of your very busy schedule. So I tell you what, folks, from here on out, I'm just going to say farewell for now. Josh, thank you for coming and being a part of this.
Tim, thank you for having me. And to everyone listening at home or wherever, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to two guys rattle off stories about, things that we've done. So thank you for your time and listening.
All right. AKB, we're out.
Pew.